Hello and welcome to Rock the Casbah block 26. This is a gorgeous block. It's very traditional in its Turkish or Persian roots, and it has one colour of applique and then 3 colours of standard stitching. It also uses the cloud quilting design. So let's get started. First thing that we're going to do is grab our cutaway stabilizer and hoop it up, and then I want to lay my embroiderer's felt on top and stitch out colorway 1, which is going to show where which is going to secure the embroiderer's felt to the project. We want to make sure that we are using wash away thread in the needle here, so that we don't leave any of the residue of that thread in our project at the end. Once we've got that first stitch out done, I'm going to remove the hoop from the machine, and I want to trim closely around the blocks, closely around the embroiderer's felt to the stitching line. Just remove all of those, and the reason that we do this is we really do not want all of this excess fabric in the project once we have finished the stitching. So we come through and we trim away, and then I'm going to take my white homespun fabric, which I've pressed and starched, lay it over that outline, and then with the wash away thread still in the needle, I want to stitch out colorway 2, which is going to secure that fabric to our project. Now while I do that, I'm also just going to give my applique fabric a quick press, and the applique fabric that I'm using on this block is the dark teal. Naturally, you can use whatever colour fabric you choose. So I'm going to load my needle now with the dark teal thread. And then I want to stitch out colorway 3, which is going to show us where we are going to lay the applique fabric. And we'll stitch that one out, and you can see it's almost a fleur-de-lis sort of a shape. I want to take my applique fabric, lay it over it, and then I'm going to stitch out colorway 4 to secure that fabric to the project. Now for trimming our applique, we need some sharp scissors, and the best sharp scissors I've found are the curved tipped scissors that we sell at Julie Hall Designs, and we've got them in some fabulous colours. And I like the fact that they are small enough to get into all the nooks and crannies as we trim away. So I'm going to trim this block, and then we're going to repeat this process for colorways 5 and 6, 7 and 8, and 9 and 10. And that is going to lay down those applique elements all the way around our project. So this is colorway 7, 8 that we're doing right now, and then the final one 9 and 10, and we'll just trim away that excess. And we're now going to stitch out colorway 11, still with the dark teal thread, and this is going to give the satin stitch around that those applique elements. Now the satin stitch that I use is a nice sexy wide satin, and it was also finished off with then 2 rows of triple stitching around one row around the inside of the satin and one row around the outside of the satin. And that really just finishes that design off and leaves your stitching looking really professional. Speed wise, don't worry about the speed that I'm stitching this design on. I'm actually stitching in real life on about 500 stitches a minute. I've just sped it up to make sure that I don't bore you all to tears. I find that the slower I go with my machine, the nicer the stitching I get. So 500 or 600 stitches per minute is my preferred speed. You'll also notice I am using T-pins there to hold my stabilizer and stop it from moving. What it does is it just provides that little bit more security to the hoop and stops that from a stabilizer from sucking in. Whenever you're doing a reasonable amount of embroidery on a block, there is always going to be that element of the block therefore becoming smaller. That's a natural thing and that's fine. We just want to limit that as much as we can. Okay, and we're almost finished with colorway 11 now. And then we are going to need to load up our pale teal thread, and we're going to stitch colorway 12, which is going to add the heart elements to the corner and a little cross in the middle of the design. Now these elements are stitched with a motif fill, and what that is doing is giving the impression that we've perhaps used an applique fabric without the effort that goes into using an applique fabric. I'm trimming as I go because I'm fairly compulsive. Obviously, if you prefer to trim just between each colour, go ahead. I don't particularly like leaving it to the very end to trim because I find it really does inhibit the results that you get. And now we've come along, I'm changing to my dark pink thread and I'm going to stitch out colorway 13, which is doing circles in the middle of the block, and then it's going to add a stitched corner element to each corner of our block. So we'll come over and work on the stitched corners. Naturally, got to break a thread sometime. And for the last colour that we're going to use, I'm going to load up our deep wine thread, and then I'm going to stitch colorway 14, which is going to add a little half satin flower to each corner, and then it's going to do a chain link design next to the pink stitching that we just completed. So that's our satin half flower, and then we're just going to come through, and we've used the chain on a couple of different blocks, so it really is a matter of helping to tie everything in together. And what I like about all of these different elements together, is it really does start to provide a texture to your project. While the stitching's going on, it's a great opportunity now to get ready your backing fabric and your wadding for adding the final layers to the quilt. You don't have to add a backing fabric and wadding. You can stop, for instance, at the end of this colour and just put your quilt together as a regular quilt. If you want to use the quilt as you go and custom quilt method, you need to prep those because they will be our next 3 colours. And by prep, I just mean iron your backing fabric and make sure you've just smoothed out by hand your wadding. Now, because of the detail in the chain link as we come around here, you'll see it does actually take a reasonable amount of time to create. And the quilting pattern that we are going to use on this design is called the Clouds quilting pattern. And it's just got a really loopy, effortlessness to it. If you, as well as getting the custom quilting design, which goes around all of the elements that we've stitched here of the block, you also get a full block of the Clouds quilted, and you get the continuous quilting block as well. And that really means that you have lots of opportunities and lots of different things that you are able to do with these blocks. For me, it's already become a project that I can come back and steal elements from as I'm creating different things. And we're on to the last corner now. So we come through and we've got that half flower. And then the final chain link border as well. Now, when it comes to quilting your project, it really becomes a matter of what you personally like. I have chosen to quilt my project with white embroidery thread to match my background fabric. If you want to quilt in just cotton, that is absolutely fine. On the back of my quilting, I am using just regular bobbin fill. And now that we've done that, finished that colour, we're going to come through and I want to reload the needle with wash away thread. I'm then going to remove the hoop from the machine and I want to come through and place my wadding over the back. Now in this instance my wadding is in 2 separate pieces because I'm trying to use up my scraps here. What I need to do to make sure that doesn't move is just use a little bit of sticky tape to hold that wadding down. And then I'm going to come through and stitch colorway 15 to secure that wadding onto our project. The reason that I can get away with having the wadding in 2 different pieces is because the backing fabric goes over it and then there is so much quilting that is done that it's going to secure those 2 elements together. So it really becomes a non-issue. Now that we've got that secured, I'm going to remove the hoop from the machine, excuse my arm there, and take away the tape and trim that excess wadding away. We don't want any excess wadding that's going to really make our seams incredibly thick and yucky. And excuse me for doing this off screen here. I'm just going to come through and trim away all of that excess before I take my backing fabric, and I want to lay my backing fabric over the back of the project and then flip the project over. Return it to the hoop, and I'm going to stitch colour 16 still with the wash away thread. What you will notice at this stage is that these two outlines that you're using to stitch down the backing and the wadding are going to be a little bit further outside of those original lines where we stitched down the main fabric and the embroiderer's felt. That's why we use wash away thread. So now I'm going to change to a white polyester thread, which is what I'm using for my quilting, and I'm going to stitch the final colour, which is colourway 17. And that's going to provide all of that quilting to finish off our project. When it comes to fabrics that you are using, you can choose to either do a single colourway, which is what I've done using 4 different colours of fabric, or you can choose to make each block different. It is totally up to you. The needle that I've used in this project is an 1175 needle, and I've used about 3 or 4 needles throughout the entire project. Now, as we come through, you'll notice that the custom quilting goes around each element within the quilt, giving you a real pop as that quilting finishes. If you are doing one of the smaller sizes, what you might want to do, excuse me, naturally the bobbin needs changing. If you're doing one of the smaller sizes and you want a larger quilt, repeat each block and just change the colours. And what you will end up with is a totally different looking block. It's amazing how our eye is drawn to those colours. Okay, so we're almost done here. And doing a final trim as we go. And there we go. Let's have a look. So you can see there that quilting has really allowed certainly those 4 applique elements to really pop out. I'm loving the texture that the star motif on those hearts and centerpiece give the block, and I think the colours are really going beautifully together. As always, if you have any questions, send them to me at sales@JulieHallDesigns. Thank you for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you for the next block in the Rock the Casbah collection. Bye.